With you tonight. This is the Equally Yoked Show. These 3 attacks within this past weekend, we've seen huge coverage, but they're all still missing the big picture. I hope I can bring you understanding into this matter. Emailing me your thoughts, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. But when they begin to cover up the hate crime by using the, I don't know, how do we put this? The excuse of, well, this is a mental health issue. You're going into some dangerous territory. Sentences will be lightened. If not, they'll be issued, or rather released back into the public, only to commit a repeated offense. This situation is similar, so one of which we've seen, Irina Zurutska. DeCarlos DeJuan Brown had 14 priors. They say it's not a hate crime. But remember what he said when she was stabbed. He said, "I got that white girl." Now, Jessica Tisch, the police commissioner, she says that mental health may have been a factor. The police, rather, they conducted this issue and they conducted the research and they said mental health may have been a factor, but he has no history of mental health. Now, I want you guys to really share your honest opinions here, because what we're going to be looking at with what happened in Berlin, what happened in New York City, 2 instances actually what happened in New York City and what happened in Seattle. Now, we don't know any information concerning what happened in Seattle as to who the shooters were. Comments are saying that this was, these were 2 young kids under the age of 21 who were under the age and couldn't obtain a weapon, and yet they used these weapons to open fire on a crowd. Now, there's not much information concerning these suspects. One of them is still at large, one of them was caught. Now, we're going to be looking at some of these images and what we've been seeing, and it's troubling because of what they're saying. So here's this tape. Jessica Tisch, what she has issued, and the factor that what may have played into this is, they say, mental health. Let's take a listen.
Jessica Tisch saying in a statement that 2 individuals, a male Asian and a male Jewish individual, were taken to a local hospital, are expected to survive after being stabbed on the Upper West Side near Central Park. In connection with that investigation, the NYPD has arrested 51-year-old Raul Morales in connection with those assaults. Detectives are continuing to work the case, but according to victim and witness statements, Tom, Morales apparently yelled "Allah Akbar" during the attacks. And now the NYPD is evaluating whether or not this is a potential hate crime. The police commissioner goes on to say, quote, "While the perpetrator has no known mental health history with the NYPD, the initial investigation suggests that mental health may have been a factor," end quote. And so that's what they're looking at this time. There's apparently no known connection between Morales, the suspect the NYPD says they have in custody, and those 2 individuals that were stabbed, as well as no connection between those individuals either. There's about a 2-block radius, a little bit less than that separated these attacks. I know people are going to ask, why is this not being investigated as a terrorist attack? Because in the past, individuals have shouted, at times in certain attacks, that phrase when conducting a terrorist attack. They would have to prove some information as far as the state of the mind of this individual and corroborate that with other statements. At this point, they're leaning heavily towards mental health being a factor, but certainly the fact that a Jewish individual was attacked, that an Asian male was attacked. There was obviously several years ago a spate of hate crimes against the Asian community. There have been a skyrocketing amount of hate crimes against the Jewish community. So looking at those 2 things, that's why on its face, they're going to investigate this as a potential hate crime attack, Tom. It'll continue to follow. But
now, look, I find that absolutely ridiculous. This is not just we can't just brush this off as a simple mental health issue. And he said, well, many people have said this phrase when conducting attacks. This is not a random phrase that people say. You notice people don't say this in the name of Jesus. They don't say in the name of Buddha or anything of that nature. They say Allah Akbar, which is Allah is greater. This is a very calculated statement, because when what we see is Islamic attacks on people, population, high densely populated areas, or where they could where they could get in and kill maybe just a couple before they are either detained, killed, you name it. And so what we saw here is also something that we see here in Berlin. So what happened in New York, we sort of compare that to what happened in Berlin. This is why this is a ridiculous thing to say, well, this is not just this is mental health. Then we got to assume that this is mental health here in Berlin. Maybe that's the mindset of these folks, because the left is the one who usually caters to these ideas that this is a mental health issue, which we know this is false. Jerry, welcome back. Deadman, glad to have you here. Folks, if you're joining in this show, join in on the chat. Email me your thoughts also, freedom@equallyoakeshow.com. I want to know what you're thinking. Very concerning that we're witnessing an increase in these attacks. And FBI, many government agencies have said, just be careful when you're going into these crowded situations, whether it's a pride parade, whether it's a food gathering for what we saw in Seattle. It's this market gathering. So there's no sort of ideology tied to it other than this gathering, the annual gathering that Seattle usually sees at this market, where we see two individuals who apparently opened fire. Yet no information is known about these suspects as of right now. And if anybody knows anything on your end and where this is being reported, but this is Berlin. So the suspect was killed after he attacked this pride parade, and he was previously flagged for terrorist links. So the connection to all of this, it ties into a bigger picture, like I said before, that they are missing. But here's one of the things that we need to point out. Zohar Mamdani on X, this is what he shared. He says, this is actually a different statement. This is his on, which we're going to go into this in a moment. This is something that he said on June 7th from a Penn Station attack where there was 6 people involved. And the same issue here was, if I'm not mistaken, the person also shouted the same type of slur. Now here it says, I have been briefed on today's horrifying stabbings on the Upper West Side. Now notice the similarities from what happened on June 7th. It says, I have been briefed on the horrific stabbing in Penn Station based on the information available right now. It's like almost a copy and paste sort of issue here. Well, this is what he's got to say. Where an Asian man and a Jewish man were attacked, according to witness and victim statements, the perpetrator yelled, Allahu Akbar, during both attacks. I am relieved that both victims are in stable condition. Now, he won't address this issue here. Okay, he just says that, according to witness and victim statements, this is what the perpetrator said. Now, this is, of course, the same Islamic faith that Zohar Mamdani has subscribed to, and it gets even deeper than what we see just in his statements here. Not concerning what he says here, but what we see the news reporting, because this is the sort of sentiment behind the Islamic faith. He says the NYPD responded immediately and arrested Raul Morales in connection with both assaults. And I'm grateful to the officers for their swift response. And of course, Mamdani is under fire because they're saying, well, all of this is being sparked out of the anti-Semitic hatred that he is pushing, this narrative from him attempting to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu per the ICC's arrest warrant. Now, of course, he's not going to be successful because the ridiculous statements that he made, even conceding to the fact that he has no ability to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And let's continue on this tape here, what happened in Berlin. And it's alarming with what you're seeing is being reported here. Let's take a listen.
Identified the suspect as Abdel B. According to police, this guy is 21 years old, a German citizen of Lebanese origin.
Now, I must bring this data point. This is based on the stabbings of Raul, this guy Raul. What's his name? Forget his last name. And the police were investigating. They found Karl Marx writings in his Upper West Side apartment. And so some books that were quite interesting when what they were looking through in his apartments is the Madman. The Mad. Let me go to the article for you so you can see what I'm looking at here, because I think it's important to what we're like, the context behind this, to figure out sort of if they want to see his mindset, what he was thinking concerning this specific attack here. The madman who screamed Allahu Akbar while stabbing an Asian and Jewish man in separate harrowing hate attacks in the Upper West Side was a fan of Karl Marx, with police finding one of the communist author's books inside his apartment. Raul Morales, who's been hit with attempted murder and hate crime charges and faces up to 40 years in prison, was arrested Thursday for the violent rampage. Investigators probed the 51-year-old shared apartment on Amsterdam Avenue, discovering writings of Marx, widely considered the father of communism, in his bedroom. According to the information at Morales' Friday night arraignment that was obtained by the Post, it says here, the document doesn't specify which of Marx's works detectives found, but the 19th century German philosopher wrote several lefty Bibles, including the Communist Manifesto Code written by Friedrich Engels and Das Kapital, which tears into capitalism. Now, the Democratic Socialists of America and what they're pushing out there is going to spark more of these issues, for sure. However, we must also point out that Karl Marx's book in the Communist Manifesto talks about the inevitability of violence in order to usher in democracy. This is their plea for democracy, their rather oligarchy, that we should replace that word with, because that's what they truly want. Now, going back to this clip here of the Berlin Pride Parade attack, let me play this clip again from the top, just so we can get an idea as to what exactly is happening here.
Society. Police tonight identified the suspect as Abdel B. According to police, this guy is 21 years. He was already known to police and intelligence services as part of a so-called Islamist spectrum. Sources told us that he apparently sought contact with Islamic State and that he had links to Islamist networks. The shocking part that security sources told us, he had actually been in jail, convicted under Germany's anti-terrorism law for preparing an act of violence. But he was released from youth detention just 2 months ago. We were very fast on scene last night. We were live with Reuters TV over a long period. Several people told me that the city was nearly cordoned off for anyone else. So the big question is, how could that happen? How could this man drive the van into the Tiergarten and kill a person and injure several others?
Now, Berlin Pride attacked by this guy named Abdul, a German citizen, Lebanese roots, motivated by Islamist extremist ideology, well known to law enforcement. He's been investigated for illegal possessions of weapons, but they only found a toy gun apparently. He had a prior assault conviction. He rams a rented truck into the parade, killing one, injured multiple people, and charged police with a knife. So this situation here of what we're seeing in Europe is increasing more and more. We know how Islam has grown in Europe, how Islam has grown in the UK as well, and the attacks that we will begin to see an uptick of, because this is usually what we'll see. We have to remember that Islam is violent to the core. This is not a faith that, again, it goes into the idea that Islam is not compatible with the West. And this was a warning that was said by many about Islam, the Islamic faith, when it begins to propagate itself within a country, within a nation. So, is Islam violent to the core? Well, look, I think we must go to this next clip here because, first of all, let's play a little bit of information that it must not be missed here. This is from another report. This is left-wing media. This is not even what conservatives are saying or whatever.
Lindsay, prosecutors said the suspect was arrested in Lebanon last year for trying to join the Islamic State group, while Berlin's mayor is speaking out tonight, saying this attack was an attack on all of us.
And so you have these leaders who are going to say, well, let's give him another chance. Okay, we see all this information. I mean, how bad could he possibly be? I mean, the immigration problem, not only in America, but of course in Europe, and where it is increasingly becoming more dangerous because of radical Islamic extremism, we can't just brush it off and say, well, all of these attacks, it's not all Muslims. And look, I agree with that statement. I agree that not all Muslims are violent. But these are the lukewarm Muslims. And this guest here on the show even concedes to the fact that if you let them slip through the cracks, you let the people fall through the cracks in the Muslim community and move towards violence. This woman on CBS, she might have just admitted that Islam can be violent if left unchecked by their own Islamic leadership. And this is a huge problematic statement. So let's take a look at this tape here.
How important is it to work with other leaders within the Islamic faith that are not extremists, because it constantly gets attached to this group of people, and everybody is not Abdullah Balat, who is now the person who, is suspected of having drove his car, killed a person, and injured 29 others.
That is a wonderful point, Tarika. I think it's so important that you made that. It is important.
By the way, it's a question that she's walking on eggshells over, because not everybody wants to a hard pill to swallow when we become this idea of a nation that is based on or built on tolerance rather than the rule of law, rather than morality that is above human morality or the collective morality.
Important for interfaith leaders, including leaders of the Muslim community, to come together and try to move forward and try to inspire people towards working together and living together peacefully and building community alliances instead of kind of letting people fall through the cracks and move towards violence.
We know there will be a heavier police presence at the next big event, and this typically happens after something like this. But what else is being done to find...
Now, despite this police presence, this is not going to intimidate somebody who wants to cause mass casualties. They don't care. Now, this is problematic, as I mentioned earlier, and Islam, as it stands, ultimately is a religion of submission. You submit to us, or we'll force you to submit. The host says other Muslims who are not like this extremist, referring to Abdul, what she does not realize is that Islam, to its core, is violent. So these These so-called radical Islamists aren't radical at all according to their own doctrine. Well, people say, Charles, you're attacking Muslims. You're racist. You're a bigot. This is totally Islamophobic. Go read their own charter. And the Quran is foundational to their charter. But one question that we should be asking is, where are the imams? Not the moms, the imams, the leaders, the religious leaders of the Islamic faith in these Muslim communities. As she said, hey, maybe we should consider, maybe we should say, you know, they should build up, or they should ask, or they should, you know, within their own Muslim community. She says, it's important for interfaith leaders, including leaders of the Muslim community, to come together to try to move forward. And look, let me just go back to this clip, because I think it's very necessary, very important what she said. Just listen carefully.
That is a wonderful point, Jerika. I think it's so important that you made that. It is important for interfaith leaders, including leaders of the Muslim community, to come together and try to move forward and try to inspire people towards working together and living together peacefully and building community alliances, instead of kind of letting people fall through the cracks and move towards violence.
So letting Muslims fall through the cracks means what exactly? Fall through the cracks of their own faith, that to fall into the fundamentalism, or the Islamic fundamentalism, as to what it actually is, what their faith actually is, instead of just being a lukewarm Muslim. Let's not let them fall through the cracks, so they can stay moderate, so they can stay, you know, not radical. But if they are going to be fully devoted to Allah, they are going to follow the scriptures, because this is indeed this is the religious zeal that they will have following Allah's commands, if they believe his word is divine and true. So let's not let them fall through the cracks, as she says. You know, let's keep them in check. This Muslim community, they can come together and try to inspire people to move towards working together. It's a very interesting statement that she comes up with here. Well, how do we get to that point? Because one, no imams have not said anything concerning this. But why do you think? They haven't condemned any of the attacks? Is it because this is necessary to usher in the 12th imam, the Messiah of the Islamic faith? But as I said at the top of the show, none of these news outlets are addressing the main issue. This type of lifestyle, the LGBTQIA, is condemned by the Islamic, something that is surprising as to what kind of attack was conducted here, and as to the crowd that was attacked. This wouldn't be a surprise, because you see the same folks that are the Gays for Gaza in New York. A very antithetical statement, because if you were in Gaza, if you were in the middle of Tehran, you would be eliminated. And so this information that we see here, and not only in what we saw in Berlin, we also saw here in Paris. A terrorist cuts down 3 women, then screams, "Allah commanded me." French police detained a man on Monday after he attacked 3 women with knives near Porte de Clichy in Paris. I'm not sure. Porte de Clichy? I really don't know how to pronounce that. Interior Minister Laurent Nunez told reporters the man attacked the 3 women, who were aged 19, 24, and 36, with 2 kitchen knives, separately wounding 2 of them. So you have what happened in New York, Berlin, and Paris. Islamic attacks. And yet there's folks that have told me time and time again, you're being too harsh here. This is Islamophobic. This is racist. This is Am I really? Because the evidence is there. The evidence is before you. It is only going to increase. This is why we warned you about what would come following Zohran Mamdani's election. They say that this is all about diversity, tolerance, and freedom. This is what this event stands for. But Islam is to submit. You submit to Islam. So I think it's quite insane when they come to these conclusions. And I think this statement made by Pastor Jack is really, really going to tie it all in. It's very necessary to see how this should be structured or understood given this current situation. Right, folks, let me know if this stream is good for you on your end, because I'm not sure what's going on. It seems like we're popping in and out. You say connecting this to Zohran is moronic. How is it moronic? I want to know your point of view concerning this. Because Zohran, the same man who's look, people are chanting for the removal or for Mamdani to be fired as mayor. New Yorkers, Jews. This buyer's remorse of electing somebody who sounded like they were going to give all these sort of wonderful promises, free groceries, tax the rich. And just Jules, you're right. You say Zohran isn't doing anything about it, except making Twitter posts by saying, well, I've been briefed on this stabbing. It's horrible. He yelled Allahu Akbar. You know, I must defend my part of the faith and say, look, not all Muslims are. He doesn't says nothing about that. He just says that, look, I'm aware because according to witness and victim statements, this is what the perpetrator said. And he's not associated with us, not associated with Islam, or we don't know him in our community, anything. Is this guy a part of the community? Is this guy like going to the local mosques? So look, I think you make it a very good point by saying Zohran isn't doing anything about it, because he's not. And yes, even the Little Italy that is being wiped off this map that I think we covered this, if not on this show, if I'm not mistaken, but he doesn't care about anybody else. Only cares about him and himself.
Trace, there's a correlation globally. It's not just New York City, but there is a message that's being sent that there's a particular religion that throughout its history has been violent and has been one that has advanced against civilized culture. We're talking about the 7th century religion of Islam, Allahu Akbar, Arabic for God is greater. And when you see this declared, what often follows is murder, death. It's tragic, but it's true. And until we realize that, we're going to be in trouble. But listen, I'm a Christian. Jesus preached peace, love, and forgiveness and grace. We've got an opposite worldview that is now permeating the United States, and it's a completely belief system that is contrary to our Judeo-Christian worldview. Trace, it's a very alarming situation, but it is historic.
Yeah.
Islam is not compatible with the West. And when we have these ideas, we have to understand that there is a sort of this idea that Zohran wants to provide. He wants government to provide these resources to people, such as give over these buildings of neglect from the landlords and hand them over to these tenants or land trusts or nonprofits. He's making a huge emphasis on this. And this emphasis of, well, let's give everybody free bus rides. Let's give everybody universal, free childcare. Let's do all these great things, X, Y, Z, and you name it. We'll do it. Because under socialism, it takes a socialist to get these things done. This is his own words. He said, Margaret Thatcher, people often quote Margaret Thatcher by saying socialism is only good until you run out of other people's money. And then you need a socialist to fix the problem. Well, there's nothing being fixed in New York City. And of course, because of his ideology, not only did we see him swear on the Quran, his allegiance is to the Quran itself. So no matter if he lies, no matter if he, whatever he promises people, equality for all, it is ultimately going to benefit the Islamic faith or those who are in his sort of circle, his community. He has surrounded himself with people in the sort of Islamic faith. And so why are we seeing this progressive movement moving at a rapid speed? It's because of the way that we're seeing this current political cycle, especially going into midterms. People, especially the young generation, those who can vote these midterm elections, they're really looking they're looking at all this data and saying, well, who am I going to vote for? Who's got the best sort of, who's going to tickle my ears with politics? Well, look, I think somebody brings in an even greater point concerning this. But we warned you folks that the mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani, isn't going to bid well for the Jewish community in New York City. We know the rise in anti-Semitism will begin to grow following his inauguration. And look, it's not only in New York, but it's also spreading like wildfire. And this is dangerous. So we've seen Jews in the streets chanting or calling for his removal of office. And look, Charlie Kirk says, if you have a generation that does not own stuff and that is not invested in the economy, political radicalism ensues. If you're over the age of 60 and you're watching this, you've benefited tremendously from the upside in this economy. And it's time that we allow access to the next generation. Let's play tape.
But the young people that I represent and the young men that I talk to, and women, but mostly men, they are on the outside looking in, and that creates bitterness, that creates resentment. And you're not going to like the politics that comes next. There are two ways this is going to go. Way one is a left-wing, confiscate the wealth, burn down the mansions, take over the corporate boardrooms, shoot the CEOs in the street like Luigi Mangione did. That's where we're going. And honestly, I wish I would have connected the dots to Mangione yesterday to Tucker, now that I'm thinking about it. That's probably the one thing I wish I would have mentioned. Because if you want to see a physical manifestation of where this goes, it is street assassinations of CEOs. It's more than redistribution of wealth. It is confiscation of wealth. It's let it burn. It is economic nihilism. Path two, hopefully, is a way that we can prudentially proceed. We're going to have to rethink how we view economics in the conservative movement. That's why we have Sagar coming up in the second hour, where it might mean at times we might have to adjust tax rates up a little bit while we also cut spending. It might mean that we have to close some loopholes. It might mean that we have to be a little less ideological when it comes to taxes, and maybe we should break up some monopolies. Again, I'm not a Marxist, I'm not a socialist, I'm an American patriot, and I know that if we do not structurally fix this, I don't want AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Zohran Mamdani running the U.S. economy. And you don't want that either.
And it will happen if you allow them to, because the things in which the democratic socialists are seeking to do Well, they want to provide these types of talking points to their viewers. Amnesty for illegals, abolish the Senate, replace the presidency, replace the Supreme Court, abolish ICE, borders and prisons, defund the Pentagon, government ownership of corporations. This is not something that is new. This is something that they're fighting for. These are long-term goals for the Democratic Socialist Party. Well, you don't believe me. This is them in their own words.
So we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform. You just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate. True. Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them. Yep. Abolish ICE. Absolutely. Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally. As a long-term plan, yep. Defund the Pentagon. Absolutely. Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
Okay, so no prisons. Government or public ownership of most large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to put up on the screen.
This is said by two others that we've actually played on this clip as well, or played on this podcast. This is not new. This is something that they're running with, and this is appealing to the youth, because of course this is the sort of audience that Zohran Mamdani has captured. And so you're talking about some folks here, right? Look, there's somebody mentioned something earlier. It says he won the majority of the Jewish vote. He has also been endorsed by the main Jewish candidate who dropped out. We also have to remember that there's two sort of sides of the Jewish community who have either voted for him or voted against him. The ones who voted for him, who were for Zohran Mamdani, are the anti-Zionist Jews, the Hasidic Jews that we've seen in New York. And the others are, the Jews that aren't necessarily practicing of Judaism. They're not practicing Judaism. They seem like, Americans that have sort of just, they came to America. They wanted to live a life that is not under the pressure from the attacks of the other nations. Seems like my stream is dropping. So if you guys can let me know if this is still good to go. But there's two sides of the Jewish piece here. So he was endorsed by Jews, but the Jews that are anti-Zionist. This is, of course, the same as Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is heavily against Israel and what Netanyahu has done, and has advocated time and time again to stop funding to Israel. Somebody also mentions that there is no evidence that stabbing in NYC is politically motivated. It is religiously motivated by the ideology. This is important because you're seeing this all across the board from what I'm showing you today, or tonight, depending on where you are when you are seeing this. But you say, look at Charlie making a slippery slope fallacy, pushing a narrative of fear to pander to scare his base. Now, what exactly is that? I mean, you're very little vague there. Well, look, it's not just, you say, what about, it's one CEO here. I'm trying to go back to your comment. CEOs, it was one CEO and it was a murder. How many other CEOs have been murdered by a public person? Now, the assassination culture, and you have to go through the context of everything that he's talking about because of the violence that we're seeing, the increase in violence, and the assassination culture concerning people that have subscribed to Mangionianism. This idea that we lift up a person who conducted an evil because he felt like he was doing a greater good. And look, I'm really curious to what you're saying here. You say Trump and his greedy elites are making socialism movement grow. I think it's more. I don't even think you're even on the dime there, because socialism is growing because of what it is catering, or who is it's catering to. As Charlie said, it's catering to a people who don't own anything. You have a generation that does not own stuff and is not invested in the economy. This political radicalism will ensue. People can't own stuff. They just rent. And this begins to begin a greater problem here. This is the ideology of the World Economic Forum. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It's exactly what it is. And so the promise of free stuff, nothing is going to ever come free. Subscribe to the podcast. Email me your thoughts, freedom@equallyokeshow.com. Let's continue on here, because we're seeing this White House correspondence. And people were, especially MS now, they've gone on full on just blind hatred. And we look at this clip here. Well, first of all, let's point out a few things about Zohran Mamdani, because people say, how does it have to do with anything about Zohran Mamdani? So families of 9/11 victims are urging organizers to keep New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani away from the 25th anniversary of the ceremony at Ground Zero. We have to remember that also Ilhan Omar has downplayed the 9/11 situation, saying that some people did something on 9/11. Oh, it was only one of the biggest events in American history. The millennials and the mindset that changed during this time was a complete turnaround on how we view our economy. We're even willing to give up our own freedoms for the Patriot Act. And so we see people like Miss Rachel, who has donated $3,000 to Democratic Socialist Abdul El Sayed. So somebody who is very influential in the sphere of children. Now, Abdul Sayed has said in a private Zoom meeting, saying that if we put the ogre on the stake. And I'm trying to find the article here. You put the ogre on the stake and everybody else will get the message. Let's see if I can find that article for you, because I think it's just, these are the people who they are putting into positions into power. Okay, let's see here. So this was leaked by Politico. It says, if I win, well, y'all came at me, so now I get to come at you. And, primarily people like John Fetterman. I have no problem to do that, he said, according to the audio of a Zoom meeting obtained by Politico. Ideally, you put one ogre on the pike and everyone else gets the message. And all of a sudden starts to sound a lot different. This is him speaking on the donor meeting. Let's play this audio tape.
Charlie, you want to call on the next person?
Prerna, I think that's you. Yes.
Yeah, hi, well, nice to meet you. I'm Prerna. I am a environmental staffer in the Senate, so very much looking forward to hopefully having you in the halls of the Senate and on the Senate Environmental Justice Caucus, of which I'm one of the staff leads. I guess my question, and this is getting a little bit ahead, of course, but even if things go very well in November, we're still looking at 2 more years of a Republican presidency. And I'm curious, I think, all reading your platform on climate and environment, these are all the right things that we should be doing, codifying the endangerment finding, but we're not going to have the chance to do that for a couple more years. I'm curious how you see, your role on environmental issues, or sort of all the issues that we're facing more broadly, going into the next 2 years of the Trump administration? How do you sort of plan? How do you envision yourself using your voice at a time when, unfortunately, we're not going to get any policy over the finish line? The best case situation is that we don't get much policy over the finish line, because it's inevitably going to be mostly bad. So I'm just curious how you see sort of your role the next couple of years in the Senate.
Yeah. So first, thank you for your work, and I hope we get to work together.
This is Abdul
very
here.
fun. I see my job as doing two things in the next 2 years. Number one, throwing as much sand in the gear of the Trump administration as I can, and using them to posterize them. Right. So, God willing, we take the Senate majority, in which case there's a tremendous amount of investigating that we can do. So let's tell the story. And then the second thing I need to do is I need to use the platform that I have, and frankly, AIPAC and all the other corporations are going to give me. If I win this race, what they don't really realize is that in spending so much money, they're turning me into David, right? So if I'm the guy who came through and beat Goliath, now all of a sudden you just gave me the best platform in the entire U.S. Senate, which I love, because then guess where all eyes are going to be? Michigan is going to be state number 5, first big swing state on the whole map. I love that for us, which means that I get to then start paving the pathway for 2028 and who will be the next president. And so part of what I need to do is understand that this job is not just about what you can do in terms of your investigatory power, of course, your legislative power, or your confirmatory power. It's also your platform power. And so how do I start telling the story? And
By the way, I want to address Mike's comment here. Says, where is the moderate Democrat supposed to go now? We aren't going to vote for socialism. They are going to cause you to vote for them by seemingly appearing as a moderate Democrat. And then when they get into, based on what they say, on their speeches, on their campaigns, they will show themselves as a moderate Democrat, but they will eventually show their true colors after elected. We saw this with Virginia. This is a perfect example of what moderate Democratic, candidate looked like. And then when she was then elected and the inauguration process happened, you saw all the changes that she made that really we're beginning to see the downfall of Virginia under the Democratic Party.
Paving out the pathway for what the next president should sound like because of what I'm advocating for, right? And how I talk about this. A lot of what I'm trying to do in this race right now, and then, if I win, is to offer compelling ways, or offer sort of memes that people can pick up who are running for president to sound like we need them to sound. See what I mean? Like I told you, my principal job is to be able to translate a lot of our broader public policy goals in language that moves people to build the political capacity to drive legislation and change public policy, right? And I think I get to do that quite a bit moving into 2028, where I can leave a lot of these memes for how we talk about this on the table, should a political entrepreneur running for president want to run on climate in a way that makes sense and is less assailable than the way we did it, I think, earlier on. That makes sense? So those are my two big jobs, right? And then I also, in the interim, need to be organizing downward and outward. Big pickup for us could be that John Fetterman seat, right? And unlike a lot of folks, they're going to F around and give me carte blanche to go take them out. That's the best thing about the way they're doing this, is if I win, you're just well, y'all came at me, so now I get to come at you. Primarying people like John Fetterman, I have no problem to do that. I'm looking forward to it. And people are like, we don't primary in the Senate. I'm watch me do it. You know what I mean? Tell me why I should stop. You know what I mean? You're going to spend $60 million to beat me? Okay, you can play at that game. You know what I mean? And then what happens is, ideally, you put one ogre on a pike, and then everyone else gets the message. And all of a sudden starts to sound a lot different.
Interesting. That's who's running for the Senate. Democratic Socialist. And that is who Miss Rachel, one of the biggest YouTube influencers. And a lot of people are not approving of this. Parents, especially parents. The people, it could care less about this. The more you don't care about situations like this, you'll begin to see this grow more and more. It'll be swiped under your feet. And there'll be nothing to stand on. No foundation, no person who has any type of American values, who cherish America for what it is, what the founding fathers intended this great American experiment to be. And so you're seeing issues like this not only in New York, but of course in California. So, nonetheless, what we're seeing in California, there's so much to uncover here. And look, if you're just joining in the podcast, thanks so much for being here. Look, I want you guys to subscribe. We're going to be covering some other stuff concerning the whistleblower in California that is released some information under Javier Becerra's time and power under Joe Biden, and the failure to keep children safe. We're looking at a lot of other issues, and I highly recommend that you subscribe. Many of the viewers that actually watch this show, about 85% of you, aren't subscribed. So please do me a favor, do me a solid, subscribe to the podcast. Email me your thoughts, freedomanicleoshow.com. Say, if people weren't so lazy and just read what the socialist Democrats want to do to this country, they would ask what's bad about socialism. They would, I think he meant they wouldn't ask what's bad about socialism. Somebody asked earlier, what are you so afraid? What do you fear about social democrats? Again, just to reiterate their position, they want to abolish the Senate, the presidency, the Supreme Court. The Democrats want to pack the Supreme Court, abolishing ICE, borders, prisons. They want to defund the Pentagon, mass amnesty for illegals. There is a plethora of these issues that they say they're long-term goals. And look, they will wait it out as long as they need to. And so they'll push every type of Democratic socialist candidate out there. And people will like this idea of a political system that they're proposing. Now, you'll see these reports. You'll see people. A lot of people won't see this stuff. You might not. And of course, algorithms, you say, wait, hold up. Who wants that? This is according to the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. The three co-chairs that we've played on this show have all said these same exact things. And this is the same three that also three candidates that we saw that were backed by Mamdani and by Bernie Sanders, like Malat Quiroz, who has these same positions, the same point of view as to how they want America to run. And so it's not just a sort of long-term goals, meaning vote for us anyway, maybe we'll give you the slop we're selling you now. When they broadcast who they are, believe them. When they publish who they are, believe them. You say, are real Democrats actually for abolishing police, abolishing prisons, abolishing the border? The socialist Democrats are. Yeah, the moderate Democrats aren't really. You're seeing people like Hakeem Jeffries. You're seeing people like even, somewhat AOC. It doesn't seem like she's fully on board, but she's, the things that she's been saying publicly. You say, I'm sorry. I believe you. Honestly, I don't like them that much, but where did the quote come from? I want to see it for myself. So let's, just for your sake, bro, I'm going to play it for you. This is one of the DSA co-chairs. And maybe I'll just pull up all three of the videos for you. Might as well. So let me play this clip and I'll play the others. I'll find the others for you.
So we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform. You just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate. True. Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Thank you for.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
Okay, so no prisons. Government or public ownership of most large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform.
I'm not going to repeat that again, but let's go to the other co-chair. This is his clip, C-SPAN.
That comment. So part of what you said, for example, let's start with abolishing the Senate. The Senate is a very undemocratic institution. I talked a bit about democracy, small d democracy, and that's really important to us. We want democratic representation of all people who live in this country. So the Senate represents, it's 2 senators per state, and it's very undemocratic at a basic level because a state with a small population has the same representation as a state that has 500,000 people against the same representation as a state that has 40 million people, like California does, or New York State, or Texas, or Florida, which are the most populated states in the country, but they have the same representation as a much smaller population. So we do believe that government should be proportional to the population, and that's a very basic core principle. So the House of Representatives is more democratic that way. And we just don't see the point of the Senate. Historically, it was meant to serve very wealthy people who owned a lot of land. And that's still a system that we have today. And it's something we would change. We would expand what the House of Representatives does and make it more actually representative of people who
He's going to get more clear.
Live in this country.
So would you like to abolish the Senate?
That's part of our platform, and we don't think that's extreme. We think it's a change that would help make this country more democratic.
So this idea is you're seeing being pushed by so far 3 of them that have gone on these news platforms, these media outlets, Fox, C-SPAN, you name it. And they're beginning to push the Overton window. They're pushing the Overton window so they can get you to believe that their ideas are not so, as he said, radical. This is not radical. This is normal. These are normal thoughts that we're having here. Normal discussions, normal debates. Now, debate is most certainly welcomed, but this is their stance. And I want to play the other clip, but I do want to there's one more clip. So stay with me. Somebody mentioned Luke 18:33, talking about Jesus said, "You own nothing and be happy." That's false. That scripture is not even. He said Jesus ordered you to have nothing and be happy. Nothing in that verse talks about anything that you're saying. First of all, so I don't know if you're just randomly quoting a verse. However, if you have an actual verse, maybe you can repost it. I don't know. Nothing of that verse that you posted, there's nothing there concerning you'll have nothing and you'll be happy. And if you're trying to maybe the quote you're thinking of is Jesus saying, take nothing with you as you go and do what I've told you to do as he sent the disciples out 2 by 2, you see that he sends them again on another time where he tells them to take stuff with them. So this idea that you're maybe pointing to is ridiculous because there's a whole context to what Jesus said and what I'm referencing rather than what you're referencing. There's nothing about Luke 18:33 that says about taking nothing or demanding or whatever, commanding that you'll have nothing. So this is the other DSA co-chair. And look, this is their platform on what they are seeking to push this narrative out there to get you to believe what they believe.
Interesting.
So let me go back here one sec. This is one of the crazy statements that he made here. I'm gonna get there in a moment. Let's see if I think the clip is around here.
Celebrated the 250th anniversary of the country, and one of the most basic things is Article 1 in our Constitution. Are you in favor of abolishing Article 1 of the Constitution?
No, we support a democratic route to transformative change in the United States. We think that we need to put the working class before the billionaire class.
So you don't want to abolish the Senate, the United States Senate, because that's what Article 1 is.
The United States Senate is an undemocratic institution. It gives more representation to people in smaller states than to the 30 million people in California.
So you've got the House of Representatives, which is population-driven, and then you've got the Senate. So every state, if you're a small state, you still get 2 senators, even though you only get maybe 1 congressman, in order to make all of the states have fair representation. So you say, I'm just confused.
When you ask normal Americans if Congress and the Senate and our political system is working for them, most people are very unhappy with the political system, and they say it's not working for them. When we think about the 250th anniversary of the United States, and we think about our proudest moments in US history, I think of times like when ordinary people rose up and they changed the Constitution to abolish slavery, to give women the right to vote.
Everyone's proud of that.
And
that's a nationwide pride in the country.
But back in those moments, those were considered radical movements because those people dared to say we need transformative change in the United States.
Right.
And I think that
now, you say this is silly. I want to go to the next clip that he says here, or the next thing that is mentioned here, when he's pressed a little further about this issue. And I mean, if you're not, if you don't think this next part is, well, yeah, this is silly. Well, I don't know. What do you mean by silly exactly? I'm curious. What is silly about this? Because he's going on major platforms. You say it doesn't mean they want to destroy the Senate building and kill everyone. It means that they don't think it should be the end all be all for passing any big legislation. You can just look this up. When you begin to meddle with the sort of the institutions that you see according to our Constitution, you begin to alter the Constitution. You begin to change. I'll play this clip in a moment. You begin to change what the founding fathers intended for America to be a successful experimentation of this country that is still an American experiment. We're only 250 years. Then you're going to see this idea become, the democratic socialist ideas become less radical, as they mentioned to get rid of the presidency. You've seen posts or articles that talk about Americans vote too much, or how they want to remove the presidency and just do like a sort of random selection of anybody, any citizen. Articles from the New York Post, I think it's the Washington Post, New York Post, and the Atlantic, talking about Americans vote too much. Let's play the rest of this clip.
Grocery store so far, it's going to cost $30 million to build a grocery store. In what world does it make sense to build a $30 million grocery store and put competitive pressure on the bodegas that are in the neighborhood?
And by the way, you're supposed to take an oath to uphold the Constitution, yes. But many of these, well, I would say, we're pointing out Zohran Mamdani because of what is happening as of late. But if you remember, he swore an oath on the Quran, not the Constitution, not even the Constitution, of course not a Bible, but not even the Constitution of America. If you don't like, there's no submission to what America or the allegiance to America that we pledge. And of course, the removal of the Pledge of Allegiance in schools that happened, specifically during Joe Biden. Anyway, just a whole set of issues that push the window further to just believe, well, it's America is becoming this sort of third world country. We're seeing Islam propagate itself more and more within our society. And these are the dangers that we're pointing out to you because of what recently happened over the weekend.
I think that what we saw in the mayoral campaign is the mayor was able to build a movement that inspired people to believe that we could have a government that works for ordinary people, that is actually responsive to the working class.
Inspiration is great, but if you're the bodega owner, how would you feel if the government opened a big grocery store right next to your bodega?
If one publicly owned grocery store that brings prices down in the neighborhood is enough to put someone out of business, then maybe they shouldn't have been in that business in the first place.
Interesting.
Shouldn't know what to say. Just like, all right. So, let's see. You say Democrats need to mature people running their party instead of these radicals. Yeah, I mean, I think Democrats will eventually come to the point of, well, if we can't beat them, we're just going to join them. And they're just, like I said, I've been saying this for a long time now. AOC, a lot of the top Democrats are just going to eventually say, well, look, they're just going to start to identify themselves as democratic socialists. That's who they are to the core, because of the policies that they want to make law, essentially. So that's kind of rough. I'll give you that one. It's, but that's the thing. It's not just this one guy, this one case scenario. It is all of them. These people are going on these media outlets and they're saying that it's not like they're, hey, well, you know, don't say the radical part out loud. They don't care. And you're saying, but is that seriously the most damning evidence that you have to point to these guys being like evil people who want to kill us all? No, it's about power. It's not about killing people. It's about power. I mean, if you look at what socialism and or communism, which will eventually turn into communism, will do, it will kill people. You look at the Hassan Piker and what how much the Democratic Party is putting him as this poster child. The Democratic Socialist Party is putting him as a poster child. And he's over there doing speeches in a Mao suit. And even the things that he's saying, people actually believe that he's some guy who's fighting for change. I mean, he's even pointed it out himself, which has a very Marxist mentality. The Marxist mentality is democracy will be instituted, because you look at the Communist Manifesto, democracy, the only way to implement democracy, there's an inevitable means of violence that will eventually ensue because you want to issue democracy. You can read around page 41. So, I mean, look, I don't know how this is not concerning, but anyway. You say, just look at the comments the left is making in this podcast. They don't have a clue what actually is going on in their own party. Goodbye, Democratic Party. Okay, fair enough. I'm still hung up on the Senate one. Say, any day of the week, I'll support the Democratic Socialists. You have these people that are speaking at, Mamdani's little thing about, landlords, where they're saying that evictions are violent. These are this is attracting the weirdest types of people. I'm trying to find this clip here. Evictions are violent. Crazy.
tenant power. When we organize...
Premiere of Spider-Man Brand New Day.
I played the, let me see if I can find the original clip here. I don't want to play this clipped Instagram reel. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going in blind here. I'm going to try to figure, I think it's around this moment here. See if we can get this right.
Little consequences to them. But Sister Isabella also says, go to your bosom, knock there, and ask your heart what it doth know. What my heart knows is that we are living in an epic chapter of history. An epic is not a romance. It's not a melodrama. An epic is the story of a new order. Our city is turning the corner on tenant power. When we organize, we win results. The Mamdani administration is emboldening us so that we no longer tolerate the violence of evictions as a matter of business as usual. My landlord owns dozens of buildings, but he is not a steward of the public trust. In fact, it is the opposite. Since 2005, I survived 3
I'm sorry, guys. I didn't have the clip playing for you.
faulty eviction cases. I've lost 3 friends to eviction, 2 of whom lived on my floor. And for the past year and a half, our supportive housing neighbors have been dissuaded from joining our fledgling tenant union.
But evictions are violent. And I mean, that concept, I just don't understand. If you can't afford your rent, what else can the tenant do? They're losing money keeping you there. And the regulations that were put in place because of COVID, I mean, it really put landlords on a sort of very harsh trajectory in their business. And the regulations that prevent them from keeping up with the standard that New York City, places like, oh yeah, you did get it wrong, Luke 18:22. Anyway, the very ideas of, I lost my train of thought, gosh. These landlords and what Mamdani is pushing to give over these buildings that these neglecting landlords, as he calls them, give them over to the tenants themselves. How are they going to be able to? What does this mean exactly? Are they going to? How are they going to transfer a building to a tenant? And how? I don't understand. How are they going to run the place if they themselves can't pay rent and they have to be evicted? And so the idea that he will give these buildings to tenants themselves, probably unlikely, but more or less to, as he says, nonprofits or land trusts. So, I mean, you're talking about seizing private property here. Seizing private property. Is that not is that not radical? So the goal here is seizing private property. I'm going to play the rest of this clip and I'll be back one sec.
But today's report shows there is a path forward. I am grateful for Mayor Mamdani's leadership, his commitment to improving our housing quality and holding low road landlords accountable, and the commitment to having tenant leaders, not just real estate leaders and bankers, but tenant leaders at the decision-making table. Mayor Mamdani's rental ripoff hearings will be remembered in the book of Lady Liberty, whose torch beacons the homeless the tempest tossed to our shores. So the greatest cosmopolis of interdependent.
Okay. All right. Luke 18:22. Let's see what he says here. Wow. I mean, first of all, you're bringing this scripture completely out of context. This is about the rich young ruler, where he goes up to the teacher. Okay, says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" There's a context to this. Not this is a prescription for every person. This is a context to the rich young ruler. Okay, I'm glad you went back to look at the scripture. That's great. But the context is the very specific person that he is talking to here. Rich young ruler has everything. He says, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." Okay, you know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Honor your father and your mother. And he said, "All these things I have kept from my youth." Jesus heard this. He said to him, "One thing you still lack. Sell all that you have and distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven." Here's the caveat: come and follow me. So you'll see how much you're actually lying to yourself. You're deceiving yourself that you have kept these from your youth. First of all, I must point out that's what's going on here. He's deceiving himself. Okay, because Jesus, what he had said previous in the Beatitudes, talking about stealing, talking about adultery, talking about murder, that if you hate your own brother, you're committing murder. So this person is most likely deceived. So that's just my own conclusion based on what we know from what Christ has preached in the Beatitudes, that somebody to be able to keep all these from his youth. I mean, this guy seems to be what? So let's go on here. He says, "One thing you still lack, sell all that you have, distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me." But when he heard these things, he became very sad, for he was extremely rich. And Jesus, seeing that he had become sad, said, "How difficult it is for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God." The context is the person who had a lot of wealth, because Jesus knew the heart of the man that was to get rid of the one thing that he was holding on to, that is his wealth, because the man was sad. So you can't take scripture out of context and say Jesus was a socialist. Like, they're just bad theology, bad understanding, and straight up out of context. When you bring it into context, well, you see the bigger picture as to who Jesus is addressing and what he, the issue of the heart. You cannot serve, Jesus said, you cannot serve two masters. Cannot serve two masters. And that is referring to money, God of money, or God. You choose one. Your heart will belong to that single type of worship. All right, guys. I'll see you in the next one. God bless you. Thanks for joining me tonight. And subscribe to the podcast. Email me your thoughts, freedom@equallyyoked.com. Say socialism is easy to sell to low IQ, uneducated, inexperienced, and lazy poor people. It's easier to take from the rich rather than to make your own money. A lot of people are saying tax the rich. Well, they don't want themselves to be taxed, but eventually it's going to happen because the rich will begin to leave, and that's about it. Someone says top 1% pays 48% of NYC's personal tax. That's 1%. 1% is leaving and they are gone. Where does the money come from? It will come from their own pockets. You're 100% right. God bless you guys. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks, Deadman, for your wonderful moderation. Appreciate it. Peace.
And people say, oh, you're fear-mongering that. No, I'm telling you right now, this generation, if the average home buying age is 38 years old, if the average age of a home buyer is 38 years old, that's probably only going to go up. And so how do we fix it? Well, again, we need more supply of homes. We need less people that are buying them. So deport 20 million people, build 10 million homes. We need to fix all the regulation around the homes. We also need to use more automation and more robotics on how we actually build the homes, which will bring down the price of homes. But also, we need to cut rates. Now, cutting rates is not everything. Cutting rates is not the entire picture. Cutting rates is not the whole thing because the price is still high, but it will unlock more capital for people that are right on the edge of purchasing a home. Play cut 320.
Do you think that Fed Chair Jerome Powell should resign?
I think he's doing a bad job, but he's going to be out pretty soon anyway. In eight months, he'll be out. But I call him too late. He's too late all the time. He should have lowered interest rates many times. Europe lowered their rate 10 times. We lowered ours none. And it's causing a problem for people that want to buy a home. Look, our economy is so strong now, we're blowing through everything. We're setting records. You know that. You see that. And whether it's the Philippines or anyone else, we're setting records at levels that nobody's ever seen before. But you know what? People aren't able to buy a house because this guy is a numbskull. He keeps the rates too high and probably doing it for political reasons. The only time I remember him cutting rates, he cut the rates just before the election to try and help Kamala or whoever he was trying to help.
Homes are inordinately expensive, especially in the Sun Belt. So you need less people that are trying to purchase them, and then you need to build new homes. We need 10 million new homes in the next 3 years. And I think President Donald Trump is looking at this, and this is where interest rates do play into this. If a developer is going to build homes, lower interest rates will incentivize him to build more homes. Understand that almost nobody is doing any construction or development on cash only. It's all financed with construction loans. And as someone who knows how those numbers work, if you lower interest rates, there will be more incentive for builders to build homes. You need a lower regulation. You need faster approval. We need a streamlined Manhattan Project. I think President Donald Trump can do Operation Home Speed or Operation Warp Speed for homes. Again, during COVID, he was able to bring people together, and I don't love the COVID vaccine shot. We all know that. But what he did was rather miraculous as far as a timeline standpoint. We need to expedite how hard and how easy it is to build a home. We need 10 million new homes. We need them in Atlanta. We need them in Phoenix. We need them in Dallas. We need them in Miami. We need them in Tampa. We need them in Orlando, the Sun Belt especially. In the Midwest, it's a little bit of a problem, but the Sun Belt, it's a housing crisis. We need to make it easier to build homes. We need to build more of them and have it easier for young people to get entry point into the economy. When you own stuff, you're less likely to support Mamdani.